cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there at my parents' kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, and I listened to my father explain, in the calm voice he used when he thought he was being reasonable, that I owed my brother $160,000. "It's simple math," my father said. He was using a napkin to clean a spot off the table that wasn't there. "He lost his job. The medical bills from the accident are drowning him. You have equity. You have savings. You don't have kids. It's just sitting there." My mother was nodding from across the table. She had made her famous pot roast for the occasion. The good plates were out. I remember thinking that was the good plates meant something bad was coming. My brother sat to my father's left and looked at his food. "I should give you some context. I'm 31. I've worked in insurance claims investigation for 6 years. My entire job, every single day, is finding the places where a story doesn't line up with the documents. I am very good at my job. My family has always found this mildly embarrassing, the way some families find it embarrassing when a daughter goes into something practical instead of something prestigious. They wanted me to be a teacher, something softer. My brother is 36. His name is irrelevant to this story. But for clarity, I'll just call him what he's always been in my mind, the favorite. He has been the favorite since we were children. When I was 14 and he was 19, something happened that my parents chose not to remember correctly. We were walking home from a 4th of July block party. It was late. 3 men came out of the alley between the hardware store and the nail salon. They wanted my brother's wallet, his watch, the chain around his neck. He shoved me toward them and ran. I want you to understand what that means. He used me as a distraction so he could get away. One of the men grabbed my arm. A neighbor heard the noise and turned on a porch light and called out, which startled them, and they scattered. I was not physically hurt, but for years after, my brother told a different version. A version where he had positioned himself between me and danger, where he had shielded me, where he had gotten a cut on his palm from throwing a punch. My parents believed his version. I stopped arguing about it when I was 16 because it was making me feel crazy. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt your own memory until keeping quiet feels like the only sane option. The accident my father mentioned happened 8 months before that Sunday dinner. My brother had been driving under the influence and rear-ended someone at a light. The other driver needed surgery on his knee. My brother settled out of court, lost his license, lost his job. He'd been driving for a logistics company and racked up somewhere north of $150,000 in combined legal fees, settlement payments, and debt from the months he couldn't work. He had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage on a house, 40 minutes from my parents. I had none of that, which, in my family's logic, made me the solution. "I've thought about this a lot," my father continued, still cleaning the invisible spot. "We all need to make sacrifices for family." "He almost died protecting you," my mother said very quietly, and I looked up from my coffee. There it was, the story. Even now, 17 years later, she was still running it. "He didn't protect me," I said. "You know that's not what happened." My father's jaw went tight. "That is not what this is about. You just made it about that." My brother finally looked at me. He had the expression he always had when he knew he'd done something wrong, but was waiting to see if he could avoid paying for it. It was a very particular look, almost hopeful. I want to pause here for a moment and tell you that none of this is what blindsided me that day. I had been half expecting something like this conversation for months, ever since I heard through my aunt that my brother's financial situation had collapsed. What blindsided me was what came next. My father put a folder on the table. He slid it toward me. Inside was a printout of my home's estimated value, pulled from Zillow with my address highlighted, and a handwritten note that broke down what my contribution could look like if I took out a HELOC against my equity. A home equity line of credit against my house. that I bought with 7 years of savings and a carefully managed credit score and 2 jobs for 2 of those years. We already looked into the process, my father said. It's not as complicated as you might think. The bank appointment could be next week if you wanted to move quickly. The room was very quiet. Did you run my credit? I asked. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We just wanted to see what was possible, sweetheart. We're not trying to pressure you. My father had run my credit without my permission, which is a federal crime. I did not say any of this out loud. I picked up my fork and I ate some pot roast and I told them I needed time to think about it, and I drove home in the dark with the radio off. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the first flag I'd seen in recent months. 4 weeks earlier, I had gotten an alert from my credit monitoring service. A hard inquiry I didn't recognize from a financing company I'd never heard of. I'd flagged it, disputed it, and started watching everything more closely. Then, 2 weeks after that, a second alert. A new account opened in my name at a furniture rental company. $1,200. I'd never rented furniture in my life. I put a fraud alert on my credit file the same day and started pulling threads. By the time I sat down at that dinner table, I had already filed a police report. The inquiries traced back to my parents' address. Someone had used my social security number, which my mother had written down for insurance purposes when I was 22, and let her handle a car claim to apply for financing and open an account. I couldn't prove yet who had done it, but I knew my social had been stored in a filing cabinet in my father's home office because I had seen it there. I had taken photographs of the documents in that filing cabinet 18 days before the pot roast dinner. I want to be clear about something. I did not go into that dinner planning to blow anything up. I went hoping I was wrong. I went hoping that the credit inquiries were a coincidence and that my parents were just scared for my brother and were asking too much without realizing it, the way scared parents sometimes do. I wanted to eat pot roast and go home and have a normal Sunday. But the folder with the Zillow printout changed things. The fact that he had actually run my credit without asking, that changed everything. I drove home, made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The next morning, I called my attorney. She has handled my affairs for 3 years. I found her when I needed a real estate lawyer to close on my house, and I kept her on retainer afterward because of the nature of my work. I explained the situation. She explained my options. We were on the phone for 45 minutes. I also called my realtor. Now, here is the part where I need to explain something about my house. I had been considering selling for about a year. Not because I needed to, but because I was thinking about relocating for a new position at a larger firm in another city, and the market in my area had been strong. I had not moved on it yet, mostly out of inertia and a little bit of sentimentality. The house was the first thing that had ever been entirely mine. But when I called my realtor that Monday morning and explained that I wanted to move quickly, she told me she had an investor contact who had expressed interest in the neighborhood. Off-market, cash offers, fast closes. She had mentioned my street to him once in passing, and he had asked her to let him know if anything came up. She called him while I was still on the line. He came to see the house the following afternoon. I accepted his offer 3 days later. The closing was set for 5 weeks out. I did not tell my family. While the paperwork moved forward, I started documenting everything. I pulled every credit report. I contacted the furniture rental company and got the application on file. It had a phone number I recognized, one that had been associated with my brother's wife for years. I forwarded everything to my attorney. She forwarded it to the fraud investigator she works with, who contacted the police department where I'd filed my report. I also changed every password, every PIN, every autopay account. I updated my mailing address to a P.O. box. I informed my employer's HR department that if anyone called claiming to be a family member and asking for information about my benefits or employment verification, they were not to provide it. This was not paranoia. This was pattern recognition. It is literally what I do for a living. The closing on my house happened on a Friday. I moved into a short-term rental that same weekend. By Monday, I no longer owned a property that could be used as collateral for anyone's debt. My parents called the following Thursday to ask if I had made a decision. "I've made several," I said. We agreed to meet that Saturday. Same kitchen. But this time, no pot roast. My mother made coffee and set out cookies from a bakery, and I could tell by the way she was arranging them on the plate, very carefully, by color, that she was nervous. My brother was there again. His wife was not. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he was wearing a sweatshirt I recognized from 10 years ago. My father opened the conversation by telling me that the bank appointment he'd mentioned could still happen, that he'd kept the option open in case I needed help navigating the process. I let him finish. Then I reached into my bag and took out a folder of my own. "I have some things I want to go over," I said, "and I want to do this calmly." The first thing I put on the table was a printout of the credit inquiry notification from my monitoring service, time-stamped, with the inquiry source highlighted. "This is a hard pull on my credit that happened 6 weeks ago," I said. "From a lender I've never contacted. It used my personal information." My mother looked at the paper. Her expression did not change. She picked up her coffee cup. "The second thing." I placed the fraud report from the furniture rental company on the table. "This is an account opened in my name. I did not open it. The contact number on the application is one I recognize." My brother pushed back slightly in his chair. Just slightly. "I've already filed a police report," I said, "and I have an attorney. I'm telling you this not to threaten anyone, but because I think you should understand where things stand." My father's voice, when it came, was very controlled. "You are making accusations against your own family. I'm showing you documents. Those could have come from anywhere. Data breaches happen all the time." "They do," I agreed, "which is why there's an investigation to determine the source." My mother set down her coffee cup. Her eyes were wet. "We were trying to help your brother. We panicked. We didn't know what else to do." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "You have so much, and he has nothing right now. We just needed you to see that." I had expected the tears. I had even, in some distant part of myself, prepared for the possibility that they would make me waver. But sitting there looking at her, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not coldness exactly, but a kind of clarity. Like a window that had been fogged for years had finally been wiped clean. I could see it all the way through. "I understand you were scared for him," I said, "but what was done to me, without my knowledge or consent, and I need you to understand what that means legally." My father leaned forward. "So what is it you want? An apology? A scene?" "I want to tell you about my house." He frowned. "I accepted a cash offer 4 weeks ago. The closing was last Friday." I slid the settlement statement across the table, the one showing the final disbursement, my name, the date. "I no longer own the property. There is nothing to borrow against." The room went very still. My brother made a sound. Not a word, just a sound, low and almost involuntary, like something he hadn't meant to let out. My father stared at the paper. His hand was flat on the table, and I watched him press down on it, very slowly, the way people do when they are trying to control something in their body. "You sold your house," he said. "I did." "When?" "When?" "When I realized what was happening." My mother's tears spilled over. "Where are you living? You sold your house and you didn't tell us." "I didn't tell you because this is my life," I said. "I make my own decisions. That has always been true, even when this family acted like it wasn't." My father's voice dropped to something I hadn't heard in years, something that lived in the memory of a 14-year-old walking home in the dark. "You did this to hurt your brother." "My brother made choices that hurt his family," I said. "I am not his choices. After everything we gave you." "Dad," I said it quietly, "I need you to hear what I'm about to say. The investigation is ongoing. I don't control where it goes from here. What I can tell you is that I am not filing additional civil claims right now. I am choosing not to pursue every option available to me. That is the choice I am making, for now." He looked at me for a long time. I looked back. "I hope you find a way through this," I said to my brother, and I meant it in the way you can mean something and still refuse to let it cost you. I genuinely do, but I cannot be the way through. I was never going to be the way through. I picked up my folder. I put it back in my bag. I thanked my mother for the coffee. She was crying fully now, not the controlled kind, and for a moment my chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with anger. That was the grief part. That was the part where you mourn the family you needed them to be and weren't. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway with the school photos in frames, past the coat rack that still had my old winter jacket on it from the last time I'd visited and forgotten it 3 Christmases ago. Out the front door. I sat in my car for a few minutes and breathed. Then I pulled out my phone and texted my attorney. "It's done. Going to call you Monday." I drove to my rental, which was a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building with a decent gym and a coffee maker that I had already learned the quirks of. I opened the window and made tea and stood looking out at the parking lot below while the sun finished setting, and I thought about the word that kept coming back to me over and over. Unburdened. That was the word. Not happy, not yet. Not healed, not by a long way, but unburdened in a way I had not felt since before I was old enough to understand how much weight my family had always assumed I would carry for them. There's something I want to say before I finish, because I've told pieces of this story to a few close friends, and the response is always some version of "but they're still your family," or "you must feel terrible," or "don't you think you could have handled it differently?" And I want to address that directly. Yes, they are my family. They are also people who used my identity without permission to apply for credit. They are people who allowed a lie about a night when I was 14 to stand for 17 years because the truth was inconvenient. They are people who looked at my life, my house, my savings, my credit score, the things I built carefully and alone, and calculated what they could extract from it without asking whether I had a say. You can love someone and still refuse to let them take from you. You can grieve a family and still walk away from it. Those two things are not in conflict. I used to think they were. That was the first thing I had to unlearn. The investigation concluded 3 months later. My brother's wife had made the credit applications. She cooperated with investigators once it was clear the paper trail was unambiguous. My brother claimed he hadn't known, and maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't, but it doesn't change the documents. There were no criminal charges in the end. The DA declined to prosecute given the amounts and the family relationship and the full cooperation. But there is a civil judgment on record. The furniture account was closed and written off. The hard inquiry was removed from my credit file. My parents have called twice since that Saturday. Both times I let it go to voicemail. Both messages were variations of "we need to talk and this has gone too far." I have not called back. I am not closing the door forever. I don't know what the future holds. But I know that any conversation worth having is going to require something from them that I haven't seen yet. A college minute, accountability, something real, not the good plates and the carefully arranged cookies, and the version of events where I'm the one who did damage by refusing to be used. I moved into a new place 2 months ago, smaller than the house, but mine in every way that matters. I repainted the bedroom a dark green that my mother would have hated, and I like it more every morning. I checked my credit report last week, clean across all 3 bureaus. Not a single inquiry I didn't put there myself. For the first time in years, everything in my financial life is exactly what I say it is. Nothing hidden, nothing borrowed against, nothing at risk because of someone else's decisions. I built that, carefully over a long time with no help. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not in anyone's debt. I've thought a lot about the word unfair since all of this happened. It's the word I used most when I was younger. It's unfair that no one believed me. Unfair that I had to watch my brother rewrite history at the dinner table while my parents nodded along. Unfair that the things I built carefully, year by year, became targets the moment someone else needed them. For a long time, I carried that word around like it explains something. It doesn't, really. It just describes the surface. What I understand now is that what happened to me followed a very straight line of cause and effect, and so did the way it ended. My brother made choices, not one big choice, dozens of small ones, over years. Each one slightly easier than the last because no one in our family ever made the cost visible. That's how it works in households like mine. The favored child gets insulated from consequences so consistently that they stop being able to calculate risk. He borrowed, overextended, gambled on a life that wasn't funded by the income he actually had, and when it collapsed, the family's first instinct was not to help him face reality. It was to find someone else to absorb it. That someone was me. It had always been me. But here is what the three of them miscalculated. They assumed that because I had been quiet about things for 17 years, I was someone who could be managed. They confused my patience with passivity. Those are not the same thing. I had spent 6 years training myself to read documents the way other people read faces, looking for the detail that doesn't belong, the number that doesn't add up, the signature that sits slightly wrong on the line. When that credit alert came through, I didn't panic and I didn't ignore it. I treated it the way I would treat any case that came across my desk. I gathered information, I built a timeline, I consulted the right people, I acted before anyone knew I was acting. That discipline, the kind that keeps you steady when everything around you is designed to make you feel small, that is not something that gets handed to you. I built it the same way I built my credit score and my savings and my career. Slowly, on purpose, with no one cheering me on. And when the moment came that required it, it was there. There's something I want to say about doing the right thing, because I know some people watching this will think I was cold. I didn't press every legal option available to me. I could have pursued criminal charges more aggressively. I didn't. Not because I was protecting my family, but because I had thought carefully about what kind of person I want to be on the other side of this. Revenge for its own sake is just another debt. I didn't want to carry it. What I wanted was to be free, clean, standing in a life that was entirely mine, with no one's hands in it. That's what I have now. If you are someone sitting in a version of what I was sitting in, a family that has mistaken your kindness for a resource, that has rewritten your story so many times you've started to doubt it yourself, I want you to know that the clearest, most powerful thing you can do is also the quietest. Document everything, know your rights, build something they can't touch, and when the moment comes, don't argue, just show them the paper. The people who tried to take from me are still out there living their lives. I don't know exactly what those lives look like now. I don't spend much time wondering. What I know is what my life looks like, and for the first time in a long time, every single part of it is something I chose. That is enough. That is more than enough.